I'm Dr. Paul. Let me share with you another tip here on how to start a chiropractic practice. Again, I'm Dr. Paul. I've opened 77 offices in 20 states. So let me share with you, there's several major factors that you want to pay attention to, but let me just share with you the big picture first. So where should you, when you're looking to start a practice, what are the major key points on where you should look to start a practice? Well, believe it or not, and it's hard for some of the younger people to get this, but it's where you're emotionally connected. And here's what happens. In our 20s, we move away from our emotional connections. And men move away faster and stay away longer. Women generally don't move away as fast and they come back closer to their emotional connections, typically like their mom. And so when I open practices, I explain this because doctors would want to go to places they've never been before. They don't know of anybody. They don't have family there. They don't have friends there. They're not from there. That's the worst case scenario. And they'll go for very shallow reasons like, oh, I like to ski, so I'm going to go to Aspen to start a practice, Well, let me tell you, that's just on all likelihood, 99% not going to work out. Because what happens is when things get tough, we always go back to familiarity because familiarity is the second highest need in life. First, there's survival, then there's security. Well, what creates security? Familiarity. So where we're emotionally connected. Now, it can be geographically emotionally connected, but also human. So I always will find out from the doctor. I'll say, well, where were you raised and where were you imprinted? Because imprinting is a whole nother story. It's way greater and stronger than if you're older and you live somewhere else. But when you were being raised and imprinted somewhere, that carries a lot more weight, especially if you're close to your mom. And I'll ask the doctor, so how often do you talk to your mom? That gives me an idea of how close they are. Or if they're married, I'll say, is your wife close to her mom? Well, how often do they talk? Well, they talk every day. They're close. Okay. And what typically happens is they always go back to where the wife is from. And especially after the first child, because that woman wants help. Their wife wants help and they feel secure with their mother. I can't tell you how many doctors have had to, went somewhere up and then they had to uproot because the wife was miserable, especially after they have the first child. The wife's not from the area. They don't know anybody. They're not from there. Maybe the doctor was. That happened to one doctor, and I'll share a couple stories with you. He went back to his home state and he was getting married to a girl that wasn't from there, didn't know anybody from there, and she'd never left home. I'm like, that's not going to work. And of course she said, oh yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Well, she wanted to get married and they got married and went up there, and within 2 years, she's yanking his eyes out, going and crying every night and on the phone with her mom. I want to go back home. I want to go back home. I don't like it here. I don't know anybody here. It's human nature. It's human nature. We like to go where we're familiar and comfortable, whether it's emotional with people or with surroundings. So, and of course, that didn't work out. He had to, another couple I know, same thing happened. She took the wife away, and within the wife makes it miserable where they either get a divorce or they have to go back because the wife just is unhappy as can be. Another situation is I talked with a doctor that was going to an area. He wasn't from the area. Now he was divorced with a kid, but he wasn't from there. I'm like, oh, so I'm looking for the emotional connection. I'm like, well, are you from there? No. So there's no imprinting. There's no familiarity. Remember, this is the second highest need in life. And most of it's subconscious. And then, so I talked to him further. I go, well, what's in that area? Well, his ex-wife. Well, what's his ex-wife doing in that area? Well, when they had a child. When they got divorced, what did she do? She went back to familiarity, security. She went back to around mom. She went back to where she was raised and where her mom and dad was. See? So where's his emotional connection now? With the child. So where did he want to go now? He wanted to go to that area, not because of his ex-wife. He wanted to help raise his child. See? That's how this works. And I'll just share the story with me. Before I knew this like and by the way, this kind of will naturally happen if you don't proactively or not aware. And by the way, I'm also not talking about going to the exact same town. I'm just, that geographic area. So that's like me. I wanted to go to the Research Triangle. I'm from the Kentucky area. I wanted to go to the Research Triangle. Why? For all the wrong reasons. There was the beach to the left. There was snow skiing's north, and you had all four seasons. Well, I didn't know anything about emotional connections. So my senior year in chiropractic college, I go out there, didn't know anybody, didn't know the area. I wasn't familiar with anything. There was no family, no friends, nothing. Now I was supposed to stay out there a week. I didn't even stay a week. I'm like, I was lonely, didn't know anybody. I'm like, I got in my car and came back. And so I didn't want to practice in my hometown because it was way too small. So I went to the next largest city so I could still drive home. I could still drive home, during lunch, during the weekday if I wanted to, and have lunch with my parents or whatever. See, so it kind of will naturally work out. But so you want to start that way. So I'm not saying go back to your exact same town, not at all. But within a certain geographic radius of draw, and again, that depends on how high of emotional connection. The higher the emotional connection, the closer, whether it's you or your wife, the closer you want to be to either the geographics or to the human beings. Typically, it's mother. That's the classic scenario, is mother. And, the wife wanting to go back. Now, they typically don't when they're in their 20s. When everybody's in their 20s, they want to go everywhere. It's like we interviewed two people that were both from Iowa, never had been anywhere else in the world, haven't experienced anything. They're in their 27 years old. They're recent graduates of chiropractic college. And they interviewed for a job in an office we had in Washington State. And I said, so I'm looking for the emotional connection because I already know what happens when there's not an emotional connection. When things get tough, you run. And where do you run to? You run to the emotional connection. But if you're already in the emotional connection, you won't think of running. You'll think of sticking it out and making it work. That's the difference it makes. So it turns out, I go, well, is any of your family here? No. So they had no family in Washington. They weren't from there. They'd never even been there. I go, why are you interviewing for this job? Well, we thought it would be nice. We like how Washington State looks and looks pretty and blah, blah, blah. In other words, bad decisions for 27-year-olds that don't know any better. And I told the guy that was in her, I said, you don't want to hire them. I said, within 6 months, they're going home. I said, she'll go home first because she's missing her mom and her area and all that. And then he's going to follow her. I said, that's what's going to happen. I said, don't even get started. You'll waste 6 months of your life, training them and working with them. I said, they're going back to Iowa. They just don't know it yet. So you don't have to go to the same area, but in that geographic, and again, it depends if you're single. Men will go a lot further distance. They typically will leave earlier in life and go further away in life, and then they come back later in life if they do. But usually it's revolved around their wife. That's usually where the emotional connection takes them. With starting a practice. In other words, when they have the choice to go where they want and start a practice. So that's how it works. And I typically had to talk to my doctors 2 and 3 times. When somebody's 27, 28 years old, they don't want to hear that. They want, to them, they got blinded vision and they want to go over to where the beach is at, or they want to go to where they can snow ski. And it's not going to work that way. You got to look further down the road. You got to be realistic and look further down the road. The reality is you're going to want to be around where your emotional connection is. And that's where it'll work. When things get tough, you won't even think about quitting. You'll just overcome them and succeed. That's what'll happen. But you'll quit very easily if you're not from somewhere, you're not emotionally connected there, you don't know anybody there. You will quit. When things get tough, you will quit very easily and run back to security, which is familiarity. Take that for what it's worth. So what I would recommend is when you're coming out of school, pay attention to your emotional connections. And And then, you might want to be around that area. Like me, I was an hour away. I wanted to be in a bigger city because at that point I was single. And the town I was from was only a town of 3,000. I mean, that's no place for a single person to be. So I was where I would want, and I was already familiar with that bigger city anyway. That's where we went shopping and watched sporting events and all that. So I was only an hour away, a quick hour drive. I could drive there and back for lunch or dinner, no problem. See, that's how it worked out. So it kind of worked naturally, before I learned all this. Well, then I started teaching it. I said, well, that's the first choice you want to make. And so sometimes I see doctors, they'll go to, making bad choices because of the skiing or the mountain, or they'll make bad choices because, one state has better insurance or better personal injury laws or something like that. I'm like, it never works out that way. When you chase the money, you'll quit early and often. And when you quit, you'll go back to where there's comfort, security, and familiarity. Because remember, it's the second highest need in life, security, meaning familiarity. It's unbelievably strong. You don't think it is? You should see some of my doctors' wives that's, in their 20s, when they didn't have kids, go, oh yeah, it's no problem going, 3 states away or cross country or whatever. And then she doesn't know anybody. She's lonely. And next thing you know, when she has that first child, it's over. She's packing her bags and going right back home around mom in that general area. So that's the suggestion I would give first, is where to start a practice. Is just in the general area. And again, if you're single, you'll probably go to a larger city. And it doesn't have to be that exact city. It could be that area within 30 minutes, an hour, or something like that. But that's what I'm looking for, is the familiarity, and then how close are the doctors emotionally to whoever's there. If they're real close, I want them closer. I'm like, do they need to see each other every day? Well, they better not be more than 25 minutes away. So then you just draw a circle, where mom is, draw a circle 25 minutes away, and then pick one of those towns that's within 25 minutes of that circle, because that's where it's eventually going to end up anyway. Anyway, I hope that helps you out. Again, I'm Dr. Paul. If you have any questions about opening a practice, again, I teach chiropractors how to start their practice, grow their practice, build their practice. My system is the T3 system. I teach how to start the practice, grow it, how to train associate doctors, and then how to invest in real estate to create wealth. That's how we help doctors create a highly profitable practice with the systems, how to create freedom with associate doctors, and how to create wealth with real estate. That's what I teach. I call it the T3 system, 3 different tiers, T3. So if you're interested in learning how to start your practice, give me a call. I'll be glad to talk to you about where you're at, but take that for what it's worth.